This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each moment has been sent as a guide from beyond. Well, that was not one of our ancestral Zen masters. That was Rumi, 13th century Persian Muslim poet, jurist, Islamic scholar, theologian, and Sufi mystic. After Roshi's talk on Monday, I switched things around a bit. When she talked about all those emotions, all those feelings that will come up and be with us. Good evening to all you future corpses. I used that as a salutation a month or so ago. I'm a hospice chaplain, and many of you probably don't know I also worked in a mortuary. So somehow that seems fitting. But more on that a little later. There's a method to my madness. In the meantime, thank you all for the gift of your presence on this beautiful autumn evening. Hopefully you were able to get a glimpse of the waxing moon. So we have a sense of place here on Great Dragon Mountain. We are reminded of our Native American heritage and remember the Tongva, who once walked these grounds before us, before it was concrete and pavement, but they still walked under that same moon. Roshi's provided us some words to use in this recognition. It's almost a prayer. I'd like to acknowledge and pay my deep respect to the Tongva people and elders and ancestors, past, present, and future. I acknowledge and offer deep gratitude to this Tongva land and water that supports us as we're gathered here right now together. And I invite you to join me in that acknowledgement, that respect, and that gratitude. We've initiated a similar practice up in San Luis Obispo at our little sitting group up there, where we remember the Chumash. And they have, of course, a long, long history there. So we're completing our fourth full day of Sesshin. Autumn wind Sesshin. What a container. We had a bookend last Sunday with Reiju's memorial, which I thought was absolutely beautiful. I agree. I talked to Roshi. She didn't sense a lot of Reiju's energy there, but it was fabulous, I think, for the family as closure. And certainly this Sesshin, I didn't see Reiju coming into the Dokusan room, where when Sensei Ensho passed away, he absolutely came in, opened the door while I was in with Roshi. I remember her teaching me to tie the knot on the oryoki bowl. Maybe she did that with a lot of you as well. And she talked about pick up the end, and it's the rabbit going around the tree, down the hole. I'll never forget it. And the next bookend will be this Sunday at Enduring Vows, Shuso Hosen. Death and birth, birth and death. Reju's finished her time in our realm, but there's a new beginning. Evie's ending her year as Shuso, but there's a new beginning as she begins to feel like a mosquito biting the iron bowl. Just remember, it's a 2.5 foot green snake. So, what's on your hearts and minds? What's been arising for you these past days, these past 4 days? There's roughly 40 of us, 20 of us, about 20 of us doing full time. We've been here since Sunday evening. And there will be 20 some more that will have come in and out of this container that we call Sesshin. How's your samadhi? Is it leaking like a sieve? Or do you have a tight container? Maybe it's an uptight container. I hope not. I see some tired faces out there. I remember once, this was a Ruatsu Sesshin, and I swear I slept almost the entire time. Now, I was in a tough job at the time, and I was spent by the time I got here. And I hit the Sesshin, and I just... And of course that irritated me at one point, and I was in Dokusan with Roshi, telling her my tale of woe. And she looked at me, and she started laughing. Sleeping Buddha. And doesn't that tie with what she was saying this Monday? When you're tired, close your eyes. When you finished your meal, wash the bowl. Dogen said, Zazen is not learning to do concentration. It is the Dharma gate of ease and joy. Not the Dharma gate leading to ease and joy, but it's the Dharma gate of great ease and joy. Are you experiencing great ease and joy? Or are you experiencing pain and sorrow? Are you bored out of your mind? Have you perhaps experienced anger during these last 4 days with all this sitting? Jealousy? Frustration? Maybe fantasies have come up, swept you away. Maybe all of the above. Good. Experience it all. Wallow in it. Steep in it. As Rumi told us, welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. I know I've run the gamut. Following one Dokusan with Roshi, taking in her news about Roshi Bernie's further decline, and then emotions arising from another family incident. I turned from the Dokusan room, made a hard right into the Kanzeon room, lit a candle, offered lavender buds, and wept as I chanted. On another Dokusan visit, I went back to sitting, chewing on my anger, my frustration, and feeling sorry for myself. I hadn't passed the koan. Admittedly, some of my sitting these last 4 days has been a rehearsal. Thinking about tonight, tweaking things that I wanted to say. Sesshin knows all about rehearsals, and we're doing a lot of rehearsals right now for the Shuso Hosen. So I didn't have a lot of boredom coming up this particular session. We have a lot going on. But how's it been for you? Harada Roshi said the final goal of Zen practice is to become a human being in the truest sense of the word. Along the way, we must at some point grasp our original self. Having once grasped it, however, we must put it away. And then he says, it is only when we have, so to speak, pulverized the jewel of the black dragon that we can become truly free. So what's that mean? Have you eaten your rice gruel? Clean your bowls. Back to my opening welcome about you future corpses. It's how I say it's kind of a crusade of mine, being a hospice chaplain. I did a workshop with Frank Ostaseski about a month and a half ago up in Northern California. He had, a little while ago, had written a book, The 5 Invitations, Discovering What Death Can Teach Us About Living Fully. It was very powerful. We had doctors and RNs, a few other chaplains. There was even a student from Jitsu Joe's school. Where is Jitsu? There she is. That was with us. And these invitations, I think you will relate to some of them. You'll be comfortable with them, I should say. One is don't wait. Where do we hear that? Do it now. This is it. What are you waiting to say, do, or be in your life? Another, welcome everything, push nothing away. So that's just what we were talking about. Everything that comes in, positive, so-called negative. Bring your whole self to the experience. Find a place to rest in the middle of things. Equanimity. We call it also sitting in the fire. And finally, this will sound very familiar to most of you. Cultivate don't know mind. Now, his book and much of the workshop was talking about folks that are going through their end of life journey, people that are dying. But the emphasis on this is for you not to wait till you're on your own deathbed. Do the work now. This is it. You know, you may not get a prolonged journey into the final moments where you can tie up all your loose ends. You may be hit by a car. You may be on a plane that goes down. You may drop over of a heart attack. Your last words may be, "Oh shit." Okay, I'll get off the soapbox. But remember that evening verse that we've been saying every night, and we say every evening up north. Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by and opportunity is lost. Each of us should strive to awaken. Awaken. Take heed. Do not squander your life. Frank signed my book. Frank, by the way, was one of the co-founders of the Zen Hospice Project in San Francisco many, many years ago. Anyway, he signed my book and he said, "Shōgen, life and death, a package deal. Love both ends of the stick." So tonight I wanted to poke a little bit at this whole field of emotions, looking at it a little bit from a Buddhist standpoint. And as many of you know, Roshi's started a 3-class series on the art of positive emotions. So her inspiration for this came from a book by Kelly Turner called Radical Remission: Surviving Cancer Against All Odds. The 9 key factors that can make a real difference. So my take from the book basically was what was laid out sounded very much to me like a great template for all of us, whether we're trying to prevent cancer, whether we're cancer patients. It's just a good recipe. And there's 9 of them. I won't go into all of this, but the one is, of course, diet, radically changing diet, taking control of your health. So taking control of your medical world. Don't let the doctors do all the dictating. Following your intuition. Using herbs and supplements. I'm a big fan of that. Then releasing suppressed emotions. Increasing positive emotions. Embracing social support. Deepening your spiritual connection. And have strong reasons for living. Now, the author, Kelly, was actually surprised to find out that of those 9, there's only 2 of the 9 that are physical. The diet change and using herbs and supplements. The rest are mental, emotional, and spiritual healing factors. They're that powerful. So, the inspiring chapter for Roshi was the increasing positive emotions, and hence the class. For me, the previous chapter before that also spoke loads to me. Releasing suppressed emotions. I guess it's really the whole topic. But suppressed emotions are any emotions that you're hanging on to from your past, whether positive, negative, conscious, or unconscious. But they do tend to be negative, such as stress, fear, trauma, regret, anger, or sadness. Do you have any of those in your life? I was so taken with it that I know I do. So I'm focusing on this as part of my own personal practice period commitment. And I guess a lot of it has to do with the work that I do, because I see people dealing with this, and not just those that are dying, but their families. There's lots of dysfunction out there. And it's amazing to watch people going through this end-of-life journey and everything that comes up. Regrets, all these things, fears. And of course, the underlying theme for me is then, I don't want to wait to that point. Let's do the work right now. So Buddhist psychology has a lot to say about emotions, both the positive, like compassion and loving kindness and acceptance and joy, and the negative emotions. Greed, hate, anger are poisons. Some of the classical Buddhist texts, and this is where it gets a little heady, they discuss negative emotions in terms of the 5 hindrances, and many of us have studied those or worked with those. Attachment, aversion, excitement, laziness, and doubt. And then these texts, these classic Buddhist texts, discuss positive emotions in the terms of the 4 immeasurables, and maybe you've read some of those or dealt with those. Loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. In the Mahayana world, we have the 6 perfections. I won't list them all. But in practice, Zazen and our ongoing daily mindfulness provides a way of being with our emotions non-judgmentally and honestly. At least that's what we're trying to do. A lot of us throw judgments, I think, in there, even though we're supposed to be non-judgmental. We watch these emotions arise and fall, and we begin to see patterns of suffering and happiness. Have you observed any of these emotions arising and falling during these last 4 days that have come up for you? Well, back to the class. We've been able to, thanks to Dharma Joy, we've joined the class remotely from San Luis Obispo and enjoyed it very much. And the very next day after, what day? That was a Thursday. So on the Friday, I had my plan together because we're supposed to design a 5-minute plan. And you state your intention out loud. You connect with feeling, embodying the emotion, locating it in your body. You extend, and it's kind of a meta practice. You extend it to yourself, and then somebody close to you, and then somebody, not so close to you, and then out to the whole world. Well, what came up for me, we had a long list of positive emotions, and then we're to pick one that spoke to us. So I picked equanimity. Mental calmness, composure, evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. So, say out loud, I will now begin the practice of equanimity. I become absorbed in it, locating it in my body. Where do you feel equanimity when you have this sense of equanimity? For me, it's down kind of in the hara. That's where I get that sense when I'm sitting in the fire, being calm and composed. I extend equanimity to myself. I extend equanimity to Carla. That's my wife. I extend equanimity to that son of a bitch ex-partner of mine. I extend equanimity to all beings everywhere. Then the phone rang. Before I answer that call, I want to take you back to another call almost 23 years ago. I pick it up and our youngest daughter, is pregnant at 15, still in high school. I spoke about this on one of my first days of reflections here, that a long time ago. And of course it became, this conversation, she's so young, she's going to ruin her life, abortion, what's going on, let's explore our options. She was adamant from day one. I want this child. It's what I'm born to do. I didn't know it at the time, but at 15, you don't have that much say as a parent. She has a baby, Taylor. Our first grandchild, who is the love of our life. But Kendra, daughter, tough life. Addiction, alcohol, at times homeless. 4 children from 3 different fathers. Only one who provides any support. Now, fast forward 23 years to the day after the positive emotion class, and I get the call. Kendra's pregnant with her 5th. Equanimity. In the class, Roshi used the line, accept things as they are. It is what it is. And yet, it's still a blow to the stomach. There's so much suffering. We chanted the lifespan at noontime. And a few lines from there. When I look at living beings, I see them drowning in a sea of suffering. Therefore, I do not show myself, causing them to thirst for me. Then, when their minds are filled with yearning, at last I appear and preach the law for them. Such are my transcendental powers. Well, may the world-honored one appear and preach to her. And maybe that's what we're all doing. For the world. Harada Roshi, I know, is always saying, I wish I could get the politicians to do Zazen. And by the way, Taylor, who's now 22, started her junior year at UC Santa Cruz. Kid is amazing and a hard worker. She'll work up to 3 jobs at a time to support herself. She is absolutely incredible. A young woman with a really positive attitude. Changes in attitude can make such a difference. I have another story that I just heard recently. My wife and I were up the coast at I was going to say board and care. Sorry, that's my background. Board and cares are assisted living facilities. This was a bed and breakfast. So at breakfast, we happened to know the owner, Bruce, who's ironically his mom is on hospice service, and her chaplain, and I see her every week. So he has some very close friends with him. And he called them family. I don't think they were related, but they've been together for years and years. Anyway, the couple are missionaries. They're Christians, and she is a specialist in autism. So their church had founded a lot of schools in Iran. Now, they don't teach Christianity. They're just kind of founded, and they work with the local kids. So they were over there, and she was telling me this story. And one day, a Muslim man comes up, pissed off. He's going to get his son and yank him out of school. Well, why? Well, he said, look, my son and I were at home. A phone call came in, and I told him, tell him I'm not here. His son wouldn't do it. Because you guys are teaching him not to lie. So he pulled him out of school. 3 days later, Dad comes back with his son and asks to be re-enrolled. And he said, I don't want my son to grow up like me. So I turned to Buddha, and there's a sutra or sutta called the Two Modes of Thinking. And it's where the Buddha, he's talking about his realization before his awakening. And there were two tendencies that he called out that were within the mind. First, he would notice that thinking imbued with sensuality or ill will or harmfulness has arisen in me, and that leads to my own affliction or to the affliction of others or to the affliction of both. It obstructs discernment, promotes vexation, and does not lead to nibbana. As part of that observation, he also said, and this was really key for me, he said that as he mindfully observed this kind of thinking with an awareness that it led to suffering, it would subside. I've used this kind of tact, if you will, with the inmates at the prison that I work at. And helping them hopefully have a shift. So, second, he would notice the opposite. Thinking imbued with reconciliation and non-ill will and non-harmfulness has arisen in me. And that leads neither to my own affliction, nor to the affliction of others, nor to the affliction of both. It fosters discernment, promotes lack of vexation, and leads to nibbana. So these emotions and thoughts are very important. And hopefully you've been working with this these last days on your own personal level. Well, I have a story about Joe, but Joe will be another time, I think. It's actually a story from one of the radical remissions. The outline for the chapters is roughly the same. They talk about the medical or scientific side of things. For example, in this about releasing negative emotions. Example of the connection with stress and cancer and fear and cancer. And then in the chapter they always have a more detailed healing story of one radical remission survivor. And this guy, it was just amazing. Had lung cancer, was diagnosed metastatic lung cancer. And they said even with aggressive treatment, 25% of people died within a year, 50% within 2 years, and 80% within 5 years. With no treatment, only 1 or 2 years. So I'm going to surmise, I just bring this into just a few paragraphs then, because it's going to take longer than the time I have allotted. But he wants to travel, so he talks his doctors into waiting for this radical treatment, so he can travel some more. And so he goes to Thailand, and he spends some time in Bangkok. And this is a true story. He's walking down the street, and here's this, sir, I must speak to you. And of course, he just kept walking because over there, that there's people always trying to sell you things. And this gentleman followed him for another 2 blocks and finally catches him while he's standing at a light. Turned around, and it's this Sikh, this guy with a black beard, turban, and he said, "Sir, as you walk past, God told me that I had to tell you your fortune." I was very skeptical. I don't believe in that kind of stuff. But then he looks me straight in the eye and he says, "Although you look very healthy, the doctors have told you that you're very sick and that you might die. But don't believe them, because I see that you're going to live until you're 88, and then you'll die suddenly." So he gets his fortune read by this guy, who goes on to say, "You will meet a red-headed lady that's going to help you." So he gets back to work, and he's with one of his coworkers who reaches, and he tells her this story, and she reaches up to a bulletin board and pulls down a business card and hands it to him, saying, "Hey, this is a local energy healer who comes highly recommended," even though the coworker had not met her. And of course, this is the red-haired woman who does this energy work with him, goes back for a CT. The tumors had started to shrink. So he asked for another 6 months before we do any radical stuff. So long story short is he goes on to these various practices, and his cancer is in remission. And he ends up, this was the juicy part, he ends up at a 10-day meditation retreat at a local Buddhist center. And then he goes through, and it said it's replete with 4:30 a.m. wake-up calls, worse than ours, and 14 hours of meditation per day. And it's supposed to be a fast track to enlightenment. So he goes on and he describes what goes on during this time, and it's very much about what you and I experienced during our time in Sesshin. He has an awakening, and it is just an unbelievably powerful awakening. Changes his whole life, all 3 seconds of it. He goes to his teacher after he's had this opening and says, "Did I experience God?" The teacher smiled and said, "Some people may call it God." He continued explaining that I had experienced my essential being below my level of mind. The Buddha taught that we are not our bodies, and we are also not our minds. The Buddha said, "Be the observer of your mind." Are you observing your mind this week? So the end of his story is with the author who's interviewing him, says what he believed was his primary cause of his healing. And he responded immediately. He said, "My change in attitude." He was focusing on letting go of his anger, and he had a lot of anger. He had been raised a Catholic. He was gay and had all these ramifications from being a gay person in a Catholic, with a Catholic background or in the Catholic Church. So he's focusing on letting go of that, his pessimism, and embracing the positive aspect of whatever he encounters in the present moment. So, keep on going. Keep sitting. We create a container for you, and you create the container for us. As Myoho said last night, we're all in this together. And there's just a quick story that I love about Roshi Burney. He was giving a talk in Germany and referencing Avalokiteshvara. So that's our Bodhisattva of compassion, who's often depicted with 1,000 hands. And these 1,000 hands have eyes. They have weapons in them to represent the various ways in which he can offer help to his followers. And basically, he's helping to prevent suffering or alleviate suffering. So there's a guy in the audience, and he stands up and he said, "This is all well and good, but I don't have 1,000 arms. I only have 2 arms. What am I supposed to do to alleviate all that suffering?" Bernie paused and then very beautifully said, "You're wrong." The man insisted, "No, I'm quite sure I only have these 2 arms." Bernie asked everyone in the room to raise their arms in the air. There were 500 people in the audience. 1,000 hands. So, of course, he's pointing that it's an illusion to think that we're all doing this work alone, by ourselves. And in truth, everything is just intimately connected. And I'll end with a quote from the great naturalist John Muir. When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe.